July 1st, 1916. Dawn broke on a battlefield unlike any before. A generation stood on the precipice. In moments, the dream of a swift victory shattered. Overwhelming fire tore through the ranks. The Somme, a name etched in infamy. A landscape transformed into a graveyard, defining the war's horror. On that single brutal day, more men fell than any other in British military history, an unthinkable cost. How did it come to this? To a Western front where men lived, fought, and died in static, brutal trenches. This was the unchanging reality of 1916. A relentless war of attrition, demanding unimaginable endurance from all. Mud, disease, and fear were constant companions. Life itself became a desperate struggle for survival, day after day. Above ground, the relentless roar of artillery was the soundtrack to a world consumed by unending violence and dread. For 2 agonizing years, the Western Front remained locked in a brutal embrace, a stalemate no one could break. Millions had already fallen. The conflict devoured entire generations, yet victory remained an elusive, blood-soaked phantom. Something had to change. Allied commanders sought a decisive blow, a strategy to finally shatter the German lines. The Somme became the chosen ground, a vast offensive planned to relieve Verdun and break the deadly deadlock. Immense in scale, it promised to be the greatest Allied assault yet. Armies gathered, poised for an unprecedented push. Logistical marvels supported the plan. An industrial-scale war demanded an equally vast, ceaseless flow of material. Each man knew the stakes. This was a desperate gamble, a last resort against an enemy dug deep and resolute. The French army was bleeding white at Verdun, their cries for relief echoing across the battlefields of Europe. The Somme offensive was conceived as an urgent lifeline, a colossal diversion to save a dying ally from collapse. The why was clear: break the stalemate, relieve Verdun, and finally secure victory. A gamble of historic proportions. An entire generation mobilized for this moment, their hopes, their fears, concentrated on one pivotal front. Yet, beneath the grand strategy, lay the grim reality. The endless, brutal toll of trench warfare on human lives. We are immersed in 1916. The Somme, a testament to the desperate, terrifying human cost of global conflict. This is the story of the trenches that broke a generation, a nightmare that forever changed the course of history. Before the storm, Europe hummed with industrial might and imperial ambition. Tensions simmered beneath a fragile peace. A single spark ignited the powder keg. Empires mobilized, marching their sons to a war unlike any witnessed before. Optimism quickly faded as swift victories proved elusive, dragging nations into an unprecedented, brutal conflict. Initial German thrusts across Belgium and France sought a decisive, rapid victory, aiming for Paris. The Allies, battered but unbowed, halted the initial onslaught, shattering Germany's dreams of a quick conquest. Both sides frantically tried to outflank each other, extending battle lines in a desperate race to the sea. Exhausted, armies dug in. What began as temporary shelter soon became an entrenched, unyielding frontier. From the Channel to Switzerland, the Western Front solidified, a brutal, static testament to stalemate. Early offensives across the Western Front proved horrifically costly. Human waves crashed against entrenched defenses. Artillery barrages, though massive, often failed to dislodge deep-dug enemy positions or cut barbed wire effectively. Infantry assaults, brave but ill-fated, withered under the relentless, devastating hail of machine gun fire. New technologies emerged, yet none offered the decisive edge needed to shatter the formidable, static deadlock. A grim pattern emerged: vast attrition, minimal gains, and an unimaginable toll on an entire generation. Trenches evolved from crude ditches into intricate, fortified labyrinths of earth, concrete, and steel. Barbed wire, machine gun nests, and deep, reinforced shelters became the hallmarks of advanced trench warfare. Artillery became more accurate, chemical weapons more insidious. Engineers refined the deadly art of defense. Defensive fortifications became masterpieces of military engineering, designed to absorb and repel any assault. Trench warfare was a brutal, static science, a grim testament to humanity's capacity for destruction. At Verdun, the French army bled white. Germany's relentless assault threatened to break its resolve. Desperate, France pleaded with its British allies for a diversion, an offensive to relieve the immense pressure. The Somme was chosen, a joint Anglo-French operation designed to draw German forces away from Verdun. The Allied imperative: relieve the French at Verdun and finally, decisively break the Western Front deadlock. German strategy at Verdun was simple: bleed France dry. Their Somme defenses were designed to hold fast. They relied on powerful, deep defensive lines, convinced their fortifications were impregnable against any attack. Germany underestimated Allied resolve and resources, believing their positions too strong to be overcome. General Sir Douglas Haig, commander of the British Expeditionary Force, now bore the immense burden of leadership. Alongside him stood General Joffre, chief of the French High Command, seeking a decisive victory at last. Their combined plan, a colossal artillery bombardment, followed by infantry waves, would pierce German lines. Allied command believed overwhelming artillery would obliterate German defenses, clearing a path for victory. These flawed assumptions, born of desperate optimism, unwittingly sealed the fate of a generation. The Somme, 1916, a name etched in history, synonymous with unimaginable sacrifice and human cost. Amidst the brutal stalemate, Allied High Command conceived a plan of unprecedented scale and ambition. This was to be the big push, a decisive breakthrough meant to shatter German resistance once and for all. A colossal Anglo-French endeavor, their combined might aimed at a single, heavily fortified German front. The objective: to breach German defenses, paving the way for a cavalry charge into open country. They believed sheer force, meticulously applied, would utterly overwhelm the entrenched enemy. The audacious strategy was simple. Artillery would destroy everything, allowing infantry to simply walk through. Artillery, the god of war, was entrusted with the monumental task of pulverizing German fortifications into dust. 1 million shells, over a week, a thunderous prelude designed to obliterate any resistance. Allied soldiers were told the Germans would be annihilated, their defenses crumbling under the relentless barrage. The logistical challenge was immense, requiring unprecedented movement of men and material to the front. Assembly trenches were dug, packed with eager men, ready to surge forward at the fateful signal. Hundreds of thousands of men, massed shoulder to shoulder, awaiting the order that would unleash them. Days of waiting under a relentless sun, the tension mounting, anticipation mixing with dread. The silence before the storm, a psychological torment, preying on every soldier's mind. Every man knew the moment the whistle blew, a new, brutal chapter of war would begin. But across no man's land, a different reality awaited the Allied advance. German engineers, learning bitter lessons from earlier battles, had constructed defenses of unparalleled strength. Their deep dugouts, 20 to 30 feet underground, were impervious to even the heaviest shells. Concrete fortifications, camouflaged and strategically placed, provided formidable resistance against frontal assault. Multiple layers of barbed wire, machine gun nests, and interlocking fields of fire awaited attackers. They had weathered countless barrages, emerging shaken but largely intact, ready to defend. Unlike their adversaries, German commanders understood the limits of artillery alone against prepared positions. Lessons from Verdun and other fronts had forged an unbreakable will and cunning defensive tactics. The Somme was not a soft target. It was a fortress, meticulously engineered for relentless defense. Allied intelligence gravely underestimated these formidable defenses, a fatal miscalculation. Behind the concrete and wire stood determined men, prepared to fight for every inch of ground. Two armies, two vastly different approaches to preparation, set for a collision course. The stage was set, the grand design laid bare, its tragic flaw yet to be revealed. The trenches of the Somme would test the very limits of human endurance, forever changing a generation. July 1st, 1916. Dawn breaks over the Somme, a day etched into history's darkest pages. Thousands of young men, some barely out of boyhood, prepared for an assault like no other. The air thick with tension, whispered prayers, and the metallic tang of expectation for battle. Across 14 miles of front, the British Empire readied its colossal, unprecedented attack. But first, the land itself would be shattered. A bombardment of unimaginable scale was imminent. 7 days, 1 million shells. The greatest artillery barrage in human history began. For a week, the artillery hammered German positions, designed to pulverize all resistance. The earth trembled non-stop. Allied command believed no enemy could possibly survive this onslaught. For those awaiting the assault, the relentless din of exploding shells was a constant companion. The terrain became a wasteland, but beneath, deep German dugouts offered unexpected sanctuary. Protected by reinforced concrete and earth, many German defenders endured the week-long hell. Crucially, vast sections of formidable German barbed wire remained untouched and impassable. As the bombardment lifted, German machine gun crews emerged from their shelters, ready to inflict carnage. The titanic pre-bombardment, meant to clear the path, had tragically failed its primary objective. They waited. Their deadly Maxim guns, unmolested, awaited the inevitable British advance. At 7:30 a.m., July 1st, the whistle blew. The first wave surged over the top. An entire generation marched forward, believing the enemy had been annihilated, expecting minimal resistance. Across no man's land, a sea of khaki figures advanced, brave and tragically vulnerable. They moved slowly, burdened by heavy equipment, across the pockmarked, treacherous ground. Then, an ominous sound pierced the air, a rat-tat-tat that would define a generation's sacrifice. From the resurrected German trenches, a hail of machine gun fire tore into the advancing lines. The meticulous plan unraveled instantly. A slaughter commenced, unprecedented in its sheer horror. The intact barbed wire proved an impenetrable barrier, funneling men into murderous killing zones. Trapped and exposed, waves of British infantry were mowed down, their bravery tragically wasted. The German defenders, safe in their positions, delivered a relentless, unforgiving torrent of steel. In minutes, no man's land became a charnel house, stained crimson by unimaginable human cost. Medics fell alongside the fighting men, unable to stem the tide of mounting catastrophic casualties. Regiments like the Accrington Pals advanced with defiant courage, their local bonds shattered within moments. Whole communities, who had volunteered together, perished together on that devastating, bloody morning. From the relative safety of their trenches, survivors watched the unfolding catastrophe in disbelief. Orders became meaningless. The advance had become a rout, a desperate struggle for survival. Fear mingled with grim resolve. Yet, the relentless German fire extinguished all hope swiftly. Chaos reigned. The air, thick with smoke and the stench of death, became a suffocating shroud. Those who made it back carried not victory, but the crushing burden of a failed, horrific assault. The terrible realization dawned. The plan, so grand in conception, had catastrophically failed. The initial assault, meant to break the stalemate, instead brought unparalleled slaughter and despair. The living bore witness to scenes that would forever haunt their memories, an indelible scar. Casualty clearing stations were overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the human wreckage returning. Back at headquarters, reports filtered in, confirming the nightmare. The Somme had claimed its first victims. By midday, July 1st, the fighting subsided in many sectors, leaving a landscape of unimaginable loss. The quiet descended, a silence more terrifying than the noise of battle, echoing with lost lives. Yet, despite the catastrophe, the battle was far from over. This was merely the brutal beginning. The immediate aftermath brought stark reflection for the survivors, grappling with their new reality. The first day of the Somme, a single day, became a tragic epitaph for a generation. The initial shock of the Somme gave way to a relentless, grinding horror. Weeks bled into months. The battle transformed into an industrialized mill of attrition, devouring men and resources without end. Life in the Somme trenches was a testament to human endurance, yet a daily descent into degradation. This was the new face of war, not grand maneuvers, but a suffocating, unending struggle for mere yards. The trenches themselves became a battlefield, an enemy within. Mud, an ever-present, suffocating foe. Rain turned the Somme into a quagmire, transforming every movement into an agonizing, energy-sapping ordeal. Sleep was a luxury, constantly interrupted by cold, wet, and the pervasive, chilling dampness of the earth. The Somme swallowed everything: men, machines, and hope, leaving only a vast, silent, muddy graveyard. Rats, grotesque companions, thrived in the trenches. They feasted on the dead and terrified the living. Lice, fleas, and disease were constant threats, silently decimating ranks, adding to the grim toll. Trench foot, dysentery, and influenza swept through the crowded lines. A biological war within. Disease and despair claimed as many lives as enemy fire, a silent, insidious killer stalking the trenches. Then came the shelling, a relentless, nerve-shredding symphony of destruction that never truly ended. From dawn to dusk, the earth trembled, every blast a reminder of imminent, arbitrary death. The air was thick with flying metal, tearing flesh and shattering bone, transforming bodies into pulp. Even at night, the horizon glowed with silent, deadly explosions, a constant, tormenting presence. The constant terror, the deafening noise, the endless carnage slowly eroded the human mind. The psychological toll was immense, breaking even the strongest spirits, leaving profound, invisible wounds. Paranoia and anxiety became permanent residents in the trenches. Trusting silence was a luxury. Yet in those fleeting moments of normalcy, men clung to sanity, to the last vestiges of hope. Despite the scale of the Somme, smaller, localized attacks continued, meticulously planned, brutally executed. Every small advance, every tactical gain, required an incomprehensible sacrifice of human life. The objective was often a mere 50 yards, a shattered strongpoint, or a particularly stubborn crater. They waited, poised on the edge of the abyss, knowing what awaited them over the top. Every yard gained was paid for in blood, a desperate, futile crawl across a shattered earth. The landscape was a slaughterhouse. Men fell like wheat, cut down by unseen, merciless machine guns. Defensive positions, often fortified beyond belief, turned no man's land into a graveyard. These desperate attempts to gain mere yards often resulted in horrific casualties and little strategic value. Innovation, born of desperation, introduced new, brutal tactics to the Somme's grim theater. New terrors emerged from the technological crucible of war: chemical attacks and devastating flame weapons, poison gas, and indiscriminate horror added another layer of unimaginable suffering and fear. The instruments of death grew more efficient, making human life increasingly cheap and expendable. For the Allied soldiers, resilience was forged in shared hardship, humor, and a desperate camaraderie. Letters home offered a fragile link to a world far removed from the Somme's unyielding brutality. From across the globe, men converged on this killing field, each carrying their hopes and burdens. These diverse Allied forces, united by a common enemy, faced the daily grind with grim courage. On the other side, German soldiers endured the same hell, defending their ground with unwavering resolve. They too faced mud, rats, and relentless shelling, their lives reduced to a primal struggle. Their well-constructed bunkers and formidable defenses made every Allied advance a bloody sacrifice. Across the lines, the soldiers, though enemies, shared the same daily existence of horror and survival. The ultimate horror transcended nationality. Both sides were trapped in this monstrous shared nightmare. Resilience, born of necessity, kept them fighting, for comrades, for country, for the hope of tomorrow. The smaller engagements, often forgotten in grand narratives, contributed to the colossal, tragic futility. For a few yards of land, a generation was broken, their sacrifice echoing across the silent, hallowed earth. As summer bled into autumn, the Somme campaign became a quagmire of mud and endless, futile struggle. Months of brutal fighting had etched deep lines of exhaustion onto every face, hope slowly fading. Across no man's land, the German defenders endured their own relentless torment, holding ground at a terrible price. Despite the immense casualties, commanders on both sides clung to the belief that breakthrough was still possible. The artillery barrages, once thought decisive, now only amplified the cacophony of suffering and destruction. But as the Somme ground on, the desperate search for an advantage led to the battlefield's next terrifying innovation. A new beast lumbered onto the apocalyptic stage, the landship, later known as the tank. Designed to cross trenches and crush wire, it promised to shatter the stalemate, a steel behemoth of war. For the first time, soldiers witnessed a mobile fortress, an armored leviathan defying machine gun fire. German defenders, unprepared and terrified, could only watch as the monstrous machines approached their positions. It moved with an unstoppable momentum, a tangible symbol of a new era of mechanized warfare dawning. Barbed wire, the trench's impenetrable guardian, was now reduced to twisted metal under its relentless advance. Yet these early prototypes were slow, unreliable, and often fell victim to mechanical failure or the treacherous terrain. Inside, the conditions were hellish. Searing heat, toxic fumes, and deafening noise tested crews to their limits. Though terrifying, their initial impact on the overall battle was limited, a glimpse of future power, not present dominance. The battlefield also saw the proliferation of other horrific technologies, like the psychologically devastating flamethrower. It was a weapon designed for pure terror, burning men alive and turning defensive strongpoints into infernos. Poison gas attacks, now more sophisticated and deadly, continued their insidious work, adding to the torment. The constant threat of chemical warfare meant an ever-present struggle for breath, even after the attack subsided, and the ceaseless drumbeat of artillery never truly ceased, churning the earth and pulverizing the landscape. As October surrendered to November, the Somme landscape transformed into a frozen, muddy wasteland. The brutal winter arrived early, bringing with it a new enemy, the unforgiving cold and relentless dampness. Mud, once a hindrance, now froze into iron, making movement agonizing and trenches lethal death traps. Despite the unbearable conditions, the High Command ordered further desperate, costly offensives to break the deadlock. These final pushes were met with the same unyielding defenses, resulting in more carnage and minimal gains. The sheer, gut-wrenching desperation of these late attacks was etched onto every soldier's ravaged face. German machine gunners, though exhausted, remained resolute, their defenses proving impenetrable even in the snow. Artillery continued to fall, the frozen ground amplifying the concussive shockwaves of each shattering blast. Wounded men froze where they fell, the casualty clearing stations overwhelmed by the sheer scale of suffering. The landscape became a graveyard, the frozen earth preserving the tragic tableau of countless fallen soldiers. Months of unrelenting combat had pushed every man to the absolute brink of human endurance, physical and mental. On both sides, the fighting spirit was slowly being eroded, replaced by a profound, soul-crushing weariness. Yet amidst the carnage, critical strategic lessons were emerging about the necessity of combined arms tactics. Commanders began to grasp that tanks needed integrated infantry support and artillery needed precise coordination. The brutal Somme offensive definitively proved the horrific limits of massed frontal assaults against entrenched positions. The casualty lists grew monstrous, forcing a painful re-evaluation of military doctrine and acceptable losses. The human cost continued its terrifying escalation, bleeding nations dry of their sons and their future. Each fallen soldier represented a shattered life, a grieving family, and an unfillable void in their communities. By mid-November, with winter tightening its grip, the battle for the Somme finally ground to a frozen halt. The fighting had ended, but the scars on the land and the souls of men would remain for generations. The Somme stood as a testament to unparalleled destruction, a landscape utterly remade by the brutal conflict. Over 1 million casualties on both sides marked the Somme as one of history's bloodiest, most futile battles. Yet, from its horrors, vital lessons in combined arms warfare were forged, reshaping conflicts to come. The Somme, A crucible where a generation was broken, but where the dark future of modern war truly began. The guns fell silent, but the silence was deafening. The Somme became a scar etched into the very earth. Survivors emerged from the nightmare, their eyes reflecting an unspeakable horror. The true cost was just beginning to reveal itself. The Battle of the Somme, a 5-month inferno, claimed lives with unimaginable ferocity. Its human toll was staggering. For Britain, the butcher's bill was immense. Over 420,000 casualties, a nation's youth decimated in weeks. France too suffered grievously. Nearly 200,000 French soldiers fell, their sacrifice echoing across shattered villages. On the opposing side, German forces endured similar carnage, with an estimated 465,000 casualties, a war of attrition. Beyond the fallen, countless thousands bore horrific physical wounds. Hospitals overflowed, overwhelmed by the endless tide. Shrapnel, gas, and disease left men permanently disfigured. Their bodies were forever altered, a stark reminder of the front. These physical scars remained for life, a constant, painful testament to the Somme's brutality. They carried the war within, but not all wounds were visible. The Somme inflicted a devastating, silent epidemic, the psychological trauma of war. Shell shock crippled countless men, shattering minds as surely as shells shattered bodies. A profound and misunderstood suffering. Society often failed to comprehend these invisible wounds, leading to ostracization and further anguish for the afflicted. Those who returned were fundamentally changed. The horrors of the Somme etched into their very souls, forever altering them. Civilian life seemed alien, mundane. The camaraderie of the trenches replaced by isolation. They were heroes, yet outsiders. Their youth was sacrificed, their innocence stolen. A generation carried the war's weight, silently battling its lasting ghosts. Back home, families endured an enduring grief. Empty chairs at dinner tables, futures tragically stolen. A nation mourned. The loss of men meant profound socio-economic shifts. Families struggled, and the fabric of society began to unravel. The term "lost generation" emerged, defining those whose youth and potential vanished in the trenches of the Somme. A void was left in society, a demographic hole that would influence Britain and France for decades to come. Post-war Britain grappled with immense change. A new, more cynical culture began to emerge, questioning old certainties. France, scarred and rebuilt, also saw its culture transformed. Literature emerged, immortalizing the trench's brutal truth. The scale of loss bred profound disillusionment with military leadership. Trust in authority was shattered, never fully restored. The Somme forced a brutal reckoning. What was the purpose of such immense sacrifice? A generation questioned everything. The Somme, a crucible of suffering, forever altered the course of the Great War, leaving profound strategic echoes. Initial Allied objectives were ambitious, a decisive breakthrough to shatter German lines and relieve Verdun. The hoped-for breakthrough never materialized, as stubborn German defenses resisted every costly assault. Strategically, the Somme failed to achieve a decisive victory, becoming instead a battle of attrition. Territorial gains were agonizingly slow and limited, measured in yards rather than miles, at immense cost. The human cost was catastrophic. Over 1 million casualties on all sides bore the brutal price. A generation was broken, leaving an indelible scar on the collective psyche of the participating nations. For Germany, the Somme intensified the bleeding at Verdun, straining their resources to breaking point. The Western Front transformed into a meat grinder, demanding unprecedented human and material sacrifice. The battle exposed the immense logistical strain, exhausting the industrial and manpower reserves of nations. Despite the carnage, the Somme became a harsh teacher, forcing all armies to confront modern warfare's realities. Artillery tactics were refined. The creeping barrage became a crucial, albeit imperfect, offensive weapon. The Somme underscored the need for overwhelming firepower, demanding new levels of coordination and precision. Infantry maneuvers evolved from massed charges to smaller, more adaptable fire and movement tactics. The emphasis shifted towards specialized units, infiltration, and the integration of new weaponry. Logistics and supply became paramount. The colossal demands of modern armies reshaped strategic planning. Fuel, food, ammunition. The relentless consumption rate forced an understanding of industrial-scale warfare. The Somme's grim lessons irrevocably reshaped military doctrine, pushing armies towards combined arms warfare. The concept of brute force alone was challenged, giving way to more nuanced, technologically driven strategies. The embryonic use of tanks at the Somme hinted at future mechanization, transforming battlefield mobility. The Somme foreshadowed the integrated, multi-domain warfare that would define future 20th century conflicts. Its strategic echoes reverberated globally, influencing military theory and practice for decades to come. The Somme, a testament to horrific cost, yet a catalyst for profound, albeit tragic, military evolution. The Somme, more than a battle, it's an enduring symbol of a conflict that reshaped generations forever. Its legacy echoes, a stark reminder of the unprecedented human cost and mechanized horror of World War I. This was war on an industrial scale. Factories churned out death, soldiers became cogs in a colossal machine, millions mobilized, landscapes scarred beyond recognition. The Somme epitomized this new, relentless form of warfare. The devastating impact on individuals and nations was immeasurable. A generation scarred, lives irrevocably altered. Beyond the numbers, each life lost represents a story, a family forever broken by the conflict. Yet, amidst the horror, we find a legacy of unimaginable courage, ordinary men facing extraordinary odds. Their resilience and bravery, often in the face of certain death, remains a testament to the human spirit. Their sacrifice was immense, a heavy price paid for a fragile future. We honor their ultimate devotion. The fields where they fell whisper tales of duty and devotion, a somber reminder of their selflessness. Remembering is not passive, it's an imperative. We must learn the brutal lessons of the past. To ensure such horrors are never repeated, understanding these stories is crucial for future generations. Support a leading analysis channel. Like, comment, share, and subscribe to help us bring history to life. Join us in our mission. Together, we can ensure these vital stories endure and continue to inform us.